It's Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner. And how you guys doing? It's been a while since we've done a quick podcast, but I think, finally had some time to be able to sit away and get prepared and get ready for a podcast. And I think that's exactly what we are going to do. Normally, we've had a couple things to talk about before we dive into our positional rankings, whether we're talking about a Michael A. Taylor trade or we're talking about Carlos Correa coming back and a whole bunch of things that we have just had to talk about in the month of January. Been very eventful, but as we get into February, it appears that there hasn't been much traction on things going on. And I think the one thing, maybe if you're a Twins fan, you're hoping is there one maybe additional piece you can add to the bullpen? Is there an additional right-handed hitting bat that you can throw into the mix? I know Michael A. Taylor is a right-handed hitting outfielder, but really known for his glove more than his bat. So maybe would the Twins bring in a slugger, a guy who could maybe log some games in a DH? Appears that for the moment they're standing pat, and that probably is what's going to happen. Twins love to surprise us, but feel like we're probably going to stay put on this one. So that leads us to the other thing is the bullpen. And what do the Minnesota Twins do with the remainder of their bullpen? Now, we went in a full bullpen position breakdown, and you can go check out the last Bombs Away podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. You can find Bombs Away. But the Twins did make a flurry of minor league free agent signings, which every team will do around this time of year, trying to make sure they get some camp bodies, get ready, especially with some guys being gone for the World Baseball Classic. You want to make sure you have some guys out there in spring training who can throw some batting practice, throw some batting practice, throw some bullpen sessions, do all that kind of stuff. And for the Twins, take a look here on the article here from Pro Sports Rumors. The Twins have inked right-hander Connor Sadek, left-handers Tyler Webb, and Sean Nolan to minor league deals. These guys have done minimal stuff in the league. There's a reason they're minor league free agents. Derek Falvey, Thad Levine love to just kind of look for spare parts in terms of finding bullpen arms, as do a lot of teams, by the way. That's just not a Twins-centric thing. When it comes to modern bullpens, teams are not going to spend a lot of money on guys who only throw every other day for one inning. You're not going to pay a guy $10 million to throw 10 pitches a game. That's just not what you want to do. If you're going to pay a guy a whole lot of money, he better be the most dominant reliever in baseball, or he better be a really good starting pitcher, or at least an above average starting pitcher. So with the Twins bringing in a lot of minor league guys and hoping one pans out and riding the wave with them for a year or two and then just being gone with them. I mean, heck, the Twins did it in 2020. Remember Matt Whistler? And everybody wanted him back, myself included. And he ends up going to the Rays in 2021. Has a nice season for them. And now where is Matt Whistler? I don't even know where he played last year. So it just goes to show you how bullpen guys come and go. And that's when the ones where you get years of consistent success, like a Caleb Thielbar or like a what looks to be Yohan Duran, guys like that who can give you multiple years of good bullpen performance, you take it. But even then, extending them, unless maybe Duran becomes elite level back end of the bullpen material, the Twins had Taylor Rogers and said, no, we don't feel like paying a reliever. So, and by the way, they're not alone in that in baseball. Not a lot of guys really do want to pay bullpen arms because they just figure that they can just go get some from somewhere else and the value will be pretty much the same. You don't have to agree with it. But that's where things stand in baseball. So the Twins inviting some minor league guys in. I know Michael Fulmer was on a lot of Twins fans' minds, myself included. I thought bringing back Michael Fulmer seemed kind of like a no-brainer. You traded for him last year, so bring him back for another year, see what you can get out of him in terms of value. And he's a guy who's here last year, comfortable, get more comfortable pitching at Target Field now that he can be here for a full year, and he's already been with the coaching staff. But the fact that the Twins didn't really work super hard to bring him back after working with him, maybe shows something. The Twins also traded for him, so it is what it is. But it just goes to say that maybe it's fine because I wish the Twins would have signed Michael Fulmer, an experienced veteran right-hander to throw in your bullpen. Push Emilio Pagan down one more spot in the chain of command would be pretty nice in the order, in the power rankings, in the pecking order, whatever kind of way you want to word it. But that just appears not to be the case. Michael Fulmer has signed with the Chicago Cubs. And again, it could be like Matt Whistler, where it turns around and goes halfway through the year, you're like, oh yeah, Michael Fulmer's still around. Or it could be, oh, geez, Twins really let Michael Fulmer go, huh? And I feel like it's going to be more of the first one than the second one. And this comes to somebody who wished that the Twins would have signed Michael Fulmer. But I think as fans, I think the issue is not getting too wrapped up in bullpen arms unless they're really, really good. Now, Michael Fulmer was solid for the Twins when they collapsed down the stretch, but he wasn't like downright dominant to the point where obviously you're going to bring him back because again, pitchers and catchers report in 4 days. And the fact that the Twins haven't done anything, or any other team has done really much to sign Michael Fulmer up until the last couple days, doesn't really show much on how highly regarded he was around the league. So maybe something can change, but right now I think Michael Fulmer is a guy. He's an above average bullpen arm, but it's not the end of the world that the Twins don't have him. No, the bullpen, I still think, and again, we talked about the full bullpen order and who the Twins have coming down the pipe and what this roster could look like in terms of the pen once the season gets going. Go back to the last podcast and check that out. The Twins brought in 3 more camp arms, and that latest piece of news about Michael Fulmer is really all we have to talk about in terms of recent Twins news. So I thought we dive right in to talking about the first baseman as now we make our way to the position players. So first base is an interesting position for the Twins because we really don't quite know who is going to be the opening day first baseman. Odds on favorite would just a gut level reaction would say Alex Kirilloff. If you read the tea leaves with Alex Kirilloff's recovery and, the Twins saying he's taking some live hitting, but he's still not fully quite up to speed. And especially with how he does in spring training, maybe Joey Gallo is the odds-on favorite to start at first base to open the year for the Minnesota Twins. But let's look into some options for the Twins at first base and start out with Alex Kirilloff. He's the front runner for first base, if not on opening day, at least for the future of the position. Alex Kirilloff, of course, can also play the corner outfield spots, but I think Alex Kirilloff probably profiles better as a first baseman, and the Twins have so many left-handed hitting corner outfielders that it's probably just better to move him to first base and figure out that issue. Now, maybe Jose Miranda goes over there to first base, depending on how Brooks Lee and Royce Lewis come up. I'd much rather have Royce Lewis be in the infield than kick him to the outfield to make sure that Miranda and Kirilloff don't have to kind of bounce around. But again, you figure out that problem when you get to it later. The real question for Alex Kirilloff, and we're straying a little bit away from the positional future for him and more towards hitting, because that's really why Alex Kirilloff is such a highly regarded player and why he's the Twins' top prospect. The Twins are so confident in him that they were willing to call him up and put him in a playoff game for his major league debut against the Houston Astros. Now, Alex Kirilloff is a great hitter in the minor leagues. He's somebody who just had great instinctual hitting skills. And by the way, the Twins trading Luis Arraez, if Alex Kirilloff can become the hitter that he's been in the minor leagues, it won't matter because Alex Kirilloff is not just a guy who can hit for power, but a guy who can hit for doubles, a guy who can put the ball in play in every part of the ballpark. I was watching a video on YouTube actually this morning, randomly just popped up on my feed, every Twins home run in July. And I saw a couple of those Kirilloff home runs. Now he had the wrist issues, of course, throughout the year, but when healthy, man, that guy could hit the ball in AAA. He tore the cover off the ball, but there were a couple home runs that he had on that 4th of July series against the Chicago White Sox where he took some tough pitches down and out and was able to just punch them over the he was just able to punch him over that left center field wall. And I just got to tell you guys, I think Alex Kirilloff, and I'm not saying anything new here, but is a really great hitting prospect and somebody who can just be a great all-around hitter and not just a power guy, not just a contact guy, somebody who can hit to all 3 parts of the field for power and for contact, could potentially be the Twins' best pure hitter if healthy. Now, that's the only thing is the wrist, but Alex Kirilloff in 2022 hit 250, 290, 361 slash line. So a 250 batting average, a 290 on base percentage, and a 361 slugging. That's not good. Not good at all. Especially in the 290 and the 361. So this guy's getting on base. He's not drawing any walks, and his slugging, he's not able to really drive the ball too much. And he was able to only get 3 home runs, of course, 2 of them coming in one game. But when you look at his numbers in AAA, he hit 359 average, 465 on base, and a 641 slugging percentage. So when you put that together, that's over 1,000 OPS. That's almost an 1,100 OPS if my Bertha Hewitt math ends up working out right here. So he also had 10 home runs in AAA last year. The wrist needs to be healthy. But Alex Kirilloff is somebody, when healthy, is a great all-around hitter and somebody who has flashed it in AAA. He's already proven that he's too good for AAA. And by the way, in 2021, he was having a nice rookie season, getting some confidence under his belt until the wrist injury really got to him. Now, they shaved off part of the bone in his wrist, which could be an issue down the road. But with Alex Kirilloff, I think it's worth the risk. And I think they're shaving off part of his bone in his wrist to try and avoid the discomfort. He's been swinging, but still not quite at the pace that the Twins probably hope he's at. He's probably going to need spring training to figure it out, and maybe even an extended spring. Now, there may be a possibility, especially depending on how guys like Trevor Larnach and Matt Wallner do, that Alex Kirilloff could be put on the IL to start the season and let him get healthy, and then come up in maybe May or late April or something like that. And then you can let Joey Gallo start at first base, and then Trevor Larnach goes into left field to pair with Kepler and Buxton, and then that answers that question. But until then, I'm assuming Alex Kirilloff is going to start the season as the Twins' opening day first baseman. Really, the only thing that is going to stop Alex Kirilloff is going to be his health. And especially with that wrist injury, he's already proven that he's a good enough hitter and at least can give you the benefit of the doubt that let this guy get more big league plate appearances. He will turn into a really, really good hitter. He just needs to get those plate appearances by being healthy. So another guy to look at, we just talked about, is Joey Gallo. Seems like he could be playing some first base based off what the Twins have said, that he's comfortable there. Gallo says he'll go wherever he needs to be in the lineup. And he's a Gold Glove left fielder. So the odds that he can translate to playing first base are probably fine. Luis Arraez played good first base last year. Not Gold Glove finalist like he was this year, but Luis Arraez is a nice first baseman. He can play the position. And first base is one of the easiest positions in baseball to play. And Joey Gallo, being a Gold Glove caliber and Gold Glove winning corner outfielder, means that he kind of understands how to work his glove. He understands this kind of stuff. And first base to left field is a bit apples to oranges, but at the same time, there's still the preparation and still the pride you take in playing with the glove that you can make it work at first base. So with Joey Gallo, again, with Kirilloff, the real problem is hitting, because Joey Gallo just stunk the last couple of years. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And the Twins are paying him $10-12 million this year on a 1-year contract. He's kind of a prove it, bounce back candidate. Now, hey, the Twins were interested in Joey Gallo at the trade deadline last year, never quite got it to materialize before he went to the Dodgers. He played well in the first couple of weeks and then fell off. And maybe if you're the Twins, your high-end hope is that Joey Gallo returns to form and becomes an all-star caliber slugger and is a nice cleanup hitter in the middle of your lineup. And you can turn around and say, hey, everybody, we did this. And especially, Falvey came from Cleveland, but Thad Levine came from Texas, and that was where Joey Gallo came up through the minors. So there's a Thad Levine connection with Joey Gallo, and that's kind of how he got to the Twins. So maybe that does mean something with Gallo coming into the fold, and with that bounce back year, getting away from New York and LA and getting to a small market with Minnesota where there is not the expectations that the Yankees and the Dodgers have, might do really well for him and might help put him in a good spot this year. At the very least, I mean, you just cut him halfway through the year, no harm, no foul. You have a lot of left-handed hitting corner outfielders, and then it just makes sure that if Larnach or Wallner or whoever is going to play, that they really have to beat out an incumbent veteran to get the job. The middle scenario, which would be a classic 2008 Twins Livan Hernandez scenario. Hey, can this guy still do it? Well, even if he can only do it for 2 months, as long as they're at the beginning, and if he fades off as the season winds down, well, then hopefully somebody else will step up and take his spot. And that's the 2008 Levon Hernandez. He was the Twins opening day starter and he got waived in August. And that could very well be the case for Joey Gallo getting on this team, playing well in the first couple months, and then all of a sudden teams figuring him out and pitchers figuring him out. And then by the trade deadline is off the team. And then Alex Kirilloff takes over at first, Trevor Larnach in left field, and we move on business as usual. That could happen as well. And I think that's more realistic than a bounce back season or him being completely atrocious. So take that for what it's worth. There are a lot of people in the Twins community, in the Twins fan base, who are very excited about Joey Gallo. I'm on the fence. I got no opinion on him. If he works out, great. If he doesn't, whatever. I don't have a real hard opinion on Joey Gallo. Seems like a nice locker room presence. Seems like a veteran in the room, can help with Correa and Buxton kind of leading this team. I got nothing really bad to say other than he's played bad. And until proven otherwise, I'm going to assume he's playing bad, but things can change. Baseball can be weird season to season. Another first base option that we also mentioned earlier is Jose Miranda. Now he's a corner infield guy. He plays first and third base, also DHs a little bit, but right now too young to quite shovel into that DH spot, cudgel him into that position for now. The power really coming on strong for Jose Miranda. He wore down a little bit towards the end of the year, something that's been well documented in a lot of publications, and Jose Miranda admitted to himself, and then which caused him to train really hard in the offseason and get in better shape and do all this kind of stuff, to the momentous and impactful and very famous quote from Carlos Correa talking about Jose Miranda. It's like, have you seen that body? Sexy. And honestly, perfect. That's just great. Thank you for that, Carlos Correa. But Jose Miranda really putting in a lot of effort to work and to get better at the position, because he did wear down as the season went on. If you look at his numbers in September, was not an ideal hitter. I mean, if you were watching games in September, who was, because the team was so bad, but Jose Miranda, somebody who wore down as the season went on, and now trying to get that turned around and figure out what he can do. Here's the thing. Actually, I know there's a lot of people that say Jose Miranda profiles better as a first baseman rather than a third baseman. And they can say that because of arm strength, and they're probably right. He doesn't have a super strong arm. But that being said, he has a little bit more range than you think, and he handled the position of third base better than the position of first base. Because looking at his stats, Jose Miranda, if you look at the more analytical defensive metrics, I don't have his fielding percentage up here, but he had a -6 defensive runs saved score at first base. Now, if you look at third base, it wasn't ideal. It was 0 defensive runs saved, but it's not -6. Now, if you look at outs above average, it was -4 outs above average at first base, 0 outs above average at third. Again, he's not a great third baseman, but he hasn't really played a ton of first. And we talk about Joey Gallo, who is a Gold Glove caliber guy, could play some first base. I'm not saying Jose Miranda's never going to be able to pick up first base. Maybe he just needs to get more reps there. But Jose Miranda came up through the minors as a third baseman. That's why he's so comfortable at the position. He's logged twice the amount of innings at first and third base with the Twins last year, but that's because they had Gio Urshela. So they got rid of Urshela to open up that position for Miranda. So Miranda was putting up worse numbers at first base in twice the amount of innings. Now, I'm not sure quite how that works. Maybe him logging less innings at third base. Maybe you give those a chance. Maybe he evens out those numbers. Maybe you give him less time. I don't know. I'm not real intricate on that, but my point is that so far he's played much better at third base than first, and it shows because he has more experience there overall through the minors, even if he played a lot of first base last year, because the Twins really were playing most of the year without a first baseman. It was pretty much a Rise and Miranda and whoever else they could find holding down the fort. Miranda's ceiling as a hitter is in that 3 to 4. His floor is about a 7. So if you look at Jose Miranda, if he hits to become the prospect and the player that the Twins hoped that he could be, and the fans hope that he can be, he's a middle of the order, 3, 4, 5 kind of hitter, maybe 4, 5, 6. But his floor, Jose Miranda is like a 7 hitter on this Twins team. And there's always value in having a good 7-hitter, but I think Jose Miranda has shown that his ceiling can be a little bit higher than being placed in that bottom third of the order, that 7, 8, 9 spot. If you look at his hitting numbers last year, he had a 268 average, a 325 on base, and a 426 slugging percentage. So you put that together, that's like a 750-ish, 751 OPS on base plus slugging, which, you want it to be like in the 800s, 900s, 1,000. You had a great season, 900 really, really good, and the 800s very solid, very much above average. Where Miranda's at right now is nice. It's not anything to scoff at, but at the same time, he didn't have like an all-star caliber season. He was able to log 15 home runs and played very well anecdotally. I don't have maybe the power leverage index or whatever that stat is in front of me, but he seemed like a guy who always really came up in some big spots. And I think that's what also endeared him to this Twins fan base, is in a year where the Twins did not have a lot of clutch hitting, Miranda provided some, especially when the Twins felt like they were hanging on and maybe going to win out this division in late August, or in late July, early August, that kind of time period. So Jose Miranda, fan favorite, a guy who could be put in the middle of this order, but right now we'll just kind of have to wait and see what eventually that does. But I think he's a guy who really could be a part of this Twins nucleus for years to come if they can figure all this out, and if he can figure himself out and be consistent over the course of the season. Because, of course, remember, he came up, played about 4 or 5 games, wasn't very good, went back down, and then mashed the ball in AAA, came back up, mashed the ball in the big leagues, and then held on to the job the rest of the year, wore out towards the end. But again, that's the whole point of having those big league at-bats. The more big league at-bats and the more time you get, the more experience you have, the more you are able to turn that out. So Jose Miranda, another guy who could potentially play first base. Those are pretty much the Twins' big league options at first base. But if we look really across the diamond, there's anybody. You could put Trevor Larnach there. You could put Ryan Jeffers there. You could put Carlos Correa there. You could put Jorge Polanco there. You could put almost anybody that can play defense there. Maybe even Max Kepler. I don't know. Nick Gordon. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Kyle Garlick could even play if he makes his way back onto the major league roster at first base. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of like DH. It's a spot so we can make sure you're in the lineup on that day. Now, don't get me wrong. First base is an important position if you have a really, really great defensive player. But if you don't have that and you can just stick by being league average, it's not the end of the world, or even a below average first baseman, just considering the things that they have to do in a given game. So let's look at some guys on their roster who maybe profile as a future first baseman for the Twins down the line. And that, of course, could be our 2020 first-round pick for the Minnesota Twins, Aaron Sabato. He's a first-round pick, big bat, high strikeout guy, just a classic first baseman. I think somebody made like a Billy Butler comparison just in terms of how he looks. He's just very thick, might be the best way, with like 3 C's thick for Aaron Sabato. Again, the big bat, when he hits that ball, it goes a mile. He's had a lot of strikeouts in the minors, like a lot of strikeouts. And that doesn't bode well because the pitching only gets tougher the more he goes along. But if he can get those power numbers high enough to kind of get in that Miguel Sano archetype where, hey man, I may strike out a lot, but when I'm connecting with the ball, nobody hits it further and more often than me. So that's Aaron Sabato's ceiling. But again, he's got to earn that because he hasn't really shown much about it. He strikes out about twice as many times as he got a hit in the minor leagues. He was great at getting on base in college, hasn't quite translated to the minors and working the count. Of course, that's going to come with better pitching and depending on how the Twins are coaching him up through the minor leagues as well. His walk rate is dipped between high A and Wichita. So again, getting up through that minor league system, the pitching gets better, and it's definitely shown in that regard. Aaron Sabato is a guy who honestly, I'm not quite sure. He hasn't risen above the prospect rankings, and he's a first-round pick. Might be a whiff by the Twins. I'm not calling him a bust, but he's just a guy who might be like a Nick Gordon. He'll probably get up to the big leagues at some point and maybe turn into a platoon player for the team while they have him under team control. And then once they're done with him, they'll flip him. Maybe like a Brent Rooker type. And maybe that's who Sabato was kind of in that role for, although Rooker was a better contact hitter than Sabato. Sabato has one mission. He's Adam Dunn. Like Miguel Sano got the Adam Dunn comparisons. I thought Miguel Sano more like Chris Davis, but maybe even Chris Davis is another comparison for Aaron Sabato. Good Chris Davis, like that. Maybe that's it. Maybe Chris Davis is the thing. If Aaron Sabato pans out, he's like 2016 Chris Davis, and if he doesn't pans out, he turns into like 2016 Chris Davis was good, right? Because it was like 2018 Chris Davis where he like didn't get a hit for the first 3 months of the season. I know I have my years messed up, but you get my time frame. People understand. Chris Davis was a really good power hitter at one point and just fell off the cliff to become unplayable. But anyway, the point is Sabato could have a future in the big leagues, but I'll be honest, the fact that he's not a Twins top 5. I don't even think he's a Twins top 10 prospect. I don't have the list in front of me, but he's a guy you've never seen people really buzzing about. Aaron Sabato. I know he was drafted in the middle of COVID, so there was a lot. I mean, people probably weren't paying attention too much, and nobody really pays attention to the Major League Baseball draft. He was a low first round pick because it was coming off the 2019 season, but still an opportunity for the Twins to probably admit that they didn't quite get on this Aaron Sabato pick. Now, he's a college baseball player too. He played in North Carolina, so you'd expect him to get to the big leagues a little bit faster than he is, considering that Trevor Larnach took him 3 years. And now that because he was drafted in 2018, so played 2019 and 2020. Well, 2019 in the minors, there was no minor league season in 2020, but did make his big league debut in 2021. Now, somebody like Sabato maybe takes a little bit more time because of the hitting approach and wanting to make sure you can really get that stuff panned out against minor league pitching before you get him up to major league pitching. The fact, though, that he is not in the big leagues yet or really even close to knocking on the door might be concerning, but he could be somebody down the pipe or somebody who, if this season goes really well and if the Twins still have question marks at first base, if Gallo and Kirilloff both really can't do it, you could look at that as well. Also, something I thought for Miranda, quickly going back to him, a way he could get to first base, and I'm just spitballing. Let's say that Kirilloff, the wrist issues are still bugging him and you can't really play him. He's on the IL, he's hurt. And let's say Joey Gallo at first base isn't panning out. He can't hit the baseball. It's ugly. And the Twins have to cut bait or at least relegate him to being more of a platoon kind of player. Maybe that is the position. Maybe that is the time that moves Miranda over to first base. If you get to the All-Star break or maybe to the trade deadline and Royce Lewis comes back, and then you stick Royce Lewis at third base next to Carlos Correa, which means that you can kind of hide Lewis a little bit defensively while he tries to work up to speed. And then you have Carlos Correa behind him being able to give him that cushion. And then you can push Miranda over to first base. Maybe that's the way how the Twins relegate this. I think it's a good problem to have for the Twins with all the prospect depth they have right now in the high minors. But baseball, when people wonder, like, where is this guy going to go because he doesn't play here? And what about this because of this? Baseball kind of has a way of working things out. Guys will either play well, guys won't play well, somebody will get hurt. Things just kind of happen for everything to work out. Rarely are there too many position battles as the season goes on. Things have a way of working themselves out, even if you have quote unquote too much depth, which the Twins kind of do right now. So Jake Rucker is another first base option for the Twins. He's 23 years old. He was a 7th round pick in 2021. He's where Sabato is the big hit, big strikeout guy. Rucker is a hit to contact guy. Tapped into his power in the latter part of his first full pro season, a little over aggressive at times, so he'll need to work the count a little bit more. He can play first base, but kind of more in that Luis Arraez of a super utility role, just kind of playing all over the diamond. So it could be first base, could be third base, could be the platoon guy, could be maybe a Nick Gordon replacement down the road if the Twins don't keep him around when Nick Gordon's service time officially wraps up. And then you have Rucker, a guy who can play a lot of those positions. But again, with Sabato and Rucker, there's really not a lot of steam behind either one of those prospects and what they can do. And now that's fine because Kirilloff is the expected first baseman and you can have him take it. And if he doesn't quite do that, then it's really easy to push Miranda over to first base. But they don't have anything. So if Miranda gets hurt and Kirilloff doesn't pan out and Gallo doesn't pan out, then they're really kind of scrambling to find a first baseman. Now, again, anybody can play first base, but if you're looking for prospect help from the minors, you really don't have much, and you might have some tough sledding when it comes to figuring that stuff out. Now, by the way, for those of you watching on YouTube, I think my chair is slipping. So I think if you watch this broadcast and I suddenly get shorter, don't be alarmed, because I think this chair is just dropping a little bit as I'm talking. But I think it's finally done. But I just looked at the video and realized that there's like a full inch less. So if you're watching on the YouTubes, pay attention for that. Anyway, that's all I really have for first baseman. There's not a whole ton in the Twin system. And as we keep getting closer and closer to spring training, and spring training keeps going, we'll be talking about these position battles throughout spring training and the World Baseball Classic and everything that's going on in that part of the baseball world. And also maybe talk a little bit about some of the rule changes in baseball, and with the pitch clock and the shift being banned and everything. And I think maybe we'll kind of split that up. And I think it's a good time to talk about how the shift could affect the Twins, but I think we'll leave that for the next one, or maybe we could pair it up with talking about the corner outfielders and talking about Max Kepler. But I think right now the emphasis is going to be on the pitch clock. And that's something that, I'll be honest, I was very, very much against the pitch clock in Major League Baseball. I thought, baseball isn't controlled by a clock. The more natural, like, let the guys play, let everybody figure it out. And the more that I stayed on that opinion, the more it was continuing to be adopted in the minors, which is fine. The minor leagues are where you should experiment rather with new rule changes and figure out what works and what doesn't, and see what the future of Major League Baseball can hold. But what minor league baseball has taught us is that the pitch clock works. And when you look at the pitch clocks of 15 seconds with empty bases and 20 seconds with runners on base, it really changes things. It's been long tested in the minor leagues. This, according to an article from Jeff Passan back in September. He says the pitch clock, when strictly enforced, has significantly accelerated the speed of games. Minor league games this season have consistently clocked in at 2 hours and 30 minutes, a time seen by many as ideal, and average games have settled a little over it. So minor league baseball games are about 3 hours, and they were able to bring it down to 2 hours and 30 minutes consistently. Incredible. That's incredible. Some Major League Baseball games take 3.5 hours. Quick Pitch, I remember Major League Baseball's highlight show, MLB Network's highlight show. They would put the time of the game on there, and sometimes you look and it'd be 3:08 for 3 hours, 8 minutes. It'd be 3:45. It'd be 4 hours, 10 minutes, something like that, which, again, I'm not somebody who inherently hates that, but also I am a diehard baseball fan, and I'm going to watch anyways. I'm not saying you need to pander to the casuals, because there is running into that where, like, these are people who probably aren't going to watch anyways, so don't pander for them when you have people who love the sport. So I'm not saying you need to pander for the sake of pandering, but I think it's a way to reach in new audiences, and it's a way to help grow baseball as well by making the game shorter. As Foolish Baseball pointed out, Bailey points out in his YouTube video talking about a pitch clock, what would you rather do? Would you rather have a 3-hour, 30-minute game, or would you rather have a 3-hour game and be able to catch in an episode of The Office before you go to bed? And I think that's a really enticing point. Make the game a little bit shorter. There is 162 of them. I promise you, you're not getting gypped on baseball. This isn't like NFL games going down to 10-minute quarters or something. You're going to be just fine. There's still plenty of baseball to watch. I think the pitch clock is really interesting in the other ways, because it's going to incentivize stealing. Because if you check a runner on a base, the pitch clock will reset. But to prevent pitchers from just continually doing this over and over and over and over again, just to reset the pitch clock, they say that you get 2 of them. And on the third throw, you can do it. You can throw on a pickoff attempt. But if you don't get the runner out, it is a balk, which means that a guy will advance a base. And that's interesting, because it makes that like, do I go for the third time? I'm going to guess most teams are going to stray away from going on that third pickoff attempt. So if you try 2 pickoffs and they're not good, one, it's going to encourage runners on the bases to get ginormous leads, because they want you to pick them off. They want you to try. So that way you can avoid, that way you have a chance of getting a balk and moving on a base. But if not, you get to the second one and you get back in safely. Well, now the guy can't. Now the guy can't make an attempt to pick you off. So you can get a big lead and you can try and steal. There's also bigger bases this year. That's a new rule. So the bigger bases make it just a little bit easier for guys to get back, make it just a little bit easier to steal a base and try and swipe it. Now they're only bigger by like an inch. They're not going to be like comically large, but it's still a little change that will impact the game, which means more stolen bases. And again, we'll talk about that more as we go through the catchers and everything for the Twins and who they have coming up. But right now it's Vasquez who's going to be the starting catcher, and he threw out more runners than anybody last year. The Twins obviously know that stealing bases are going to be a thing next year more frequently, and Ryan Jeffers cannot throw guys out to save his life as a catcher. So that's also interesting. So not only are you speeding up the game, you're incentivizing more stolen bases, which is something that teams, including the Twins, have strayed away from in the last 15 years because they want to keep their guys on base. It's the old Billy Beane line in Moneyball. I pay you to get on first base. I don't pay you to get thrown out at second. Again, I like stolen bases, adds more excitement to the game. That being said, the Twins need to do a better job at throwing guys out. So not every rule is going to be fun. Not every rule is going to be fair. Not every rule is going to feel like it's working, but I think it's their way, Major League Baseball's way of generating excitement, their way of speeding up the game and also giving it a little bit more of a pace. Time will tell if it really works at the major league level, but I think it will based on how it did in the minors, and there was little to no resistance. And now that it's at the big league level, it's probably going to be just fine, because the more you do it, the more minor league players who are already playing under these rules come up, and it's no big deal for them. So it shouldn't really be a big deal for any of the big league pitchers as well. But when you look at the stolen bases and the pitch clock and all this kind of stuff, it all goes together. And I think a pitch clock will help Major League Baseball. And that's weird. I don't like admitting that, but here we are. So I talked a little bit about those rule changes, and I talked more than just the pitch clock, but that is how these new rules are being laid out. We'll talk more about the shift and that ban and how things can be impacted and how it'll impact the Twins specifically on another podcast. But I think this is a good point to wrap it up and call her a day. We are moving closer and closer to spring training. The Twins truck is already down on the way to Fort Myers. Pitchers and catchers are slowly reporting, and the World Baseball Classic is just around the corner as well. And we'll try and cover all of that here on Bombs Away, a Minnesota sports podcast.